Can I welcome everybody this evening? St Helens Planning. Thank you. My name is Councillor Glover. I'll be chairing this meeting. So I'm surrounded by officers who are helping us this evening with our deliberations. As we normally do, we put names to faces of the councillors. We'll start with Councillor Pearl, please.
Did you hear that? Right. Councillor Jeff Pearl, Eccleston Ward.
Councillor Alan Jones, Rainford.
Councillor Noble Charlton, Fatto Hay.
Councillor Jill Neal, Windle.
Councillor John Fulham, Mossbank.
Councillor Janet Johnson, Sutton Ward.
Councillor Derek Long, West Park.
Councillor Gareth Cross from Bold.
Councillor Martin Bond, Historic Haydock. Councillor Joe Pearson from Billings and Sedley Green.
Councillor Lynn Clark, Town Centre Ward.
Councillor Keith Roberts, Power Ward.
Councillor Linda Maloney, Blackroot Ward.
Thank you, members. We can go straight on to item number 1, apologies.
I've had apologies, Chair, from Councillor Shields.
Thank you. You have before you the minutes of the meeting which was on the 1st of November last year. Are you happy for me to sign them as a true and correct record?
Move that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, declarations of interest. If you'll just raise your hands. Councillor Maloney.
I'd like to declare a personal interest.
Councillor Roberts.
I'd like to also declare a personal interest.
Councillor Bond.
Non-pecuniary interest is the ward member for Haydock.
Councillor Clark.
A personal non-prejudicial. Thank you.
Can I also declare a personal interest for the second application, please? Councillor Fulham.
With regards to the second application, Chair, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary personal interest as a member of the Parish Council.
And also myself, Chair, as well, on the same basis.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Item number 4, we have 2 items on the agenda, but before we actually go into them, there is a protocol that we always let the room know about. Mr. Dickens, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. To assist those members of the public who wish to address the committee, I'd like to point out the following. A total of 30 minutes is allocated to the 7 objectors who have registered to speak against the application. This gives each speaker 4 minutes and 17 seconds. A total of 3 minutes is allocated to each councillor, not on the planning committee, speaking on the planning application. And up to 30 minutes is allocated to the applicant or their representatives to speak for the application. Can I remind those speaking, including members of the committee, that they must have the speakers on when they speak in order that the proper recording of this committee can be made. Comment should be restricted to material planning issues. There is no opportunity for dialogue between the committee and members of the public or applicant, nor will the public or applicant be able to ask questions of the officers or the committee. Interruptions from the public are not acceptable, and the Chairman reserves the right to suspend the meeting, have the room cleared and recommence the meeting without the public being present. And finally, if you have a mobile phone with you, please could you switch it off, as they can interfere with the speakers and the recording system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first application we're going to consider tonight is application 2016/0608, which is a hybrid application, land at Florida Farm North. Mr. Kilroe, are you leading on this?
I am, Chair, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. On the screens is the Google Maps aerial photo of the application site. As you can see, it's an irregularly shaped agricultural field in the Greenbelt. The site is free from any structures and it rises to the north. The site's main features include a number of woodlands, hedgerows, ponds and a brook running along its southeastern boundary. The A580 East Lancashire Road runs along the southern boundary of the site with an agricultural field and residential dwellings on Springfield Park and Great Delft beyond. Haydock Industrial Estate lies to the east of the site, and to the northeast there is an agricultural field which is separated from the site by a public right-of-way. Pewfall Park and arable farmland adjoin the site along its northwestern boundary, and beyond this there are a number of residential properties on the A58 Liverpool Road. The western boundary of the site is formed by Slag Lane. This application is in hybrid form, so some parts of the development are being applied for in full and some are being applied for in outline. The full planning application includes the upgrade of the existing Haydock Lane junction on the A580, which is shown on the screens behind. The upgrade would give the site direct access to the A580, as well as including a link into Haydock Industrial Estate. The junction would enable all vehicles leaving the site and the industrial estate to turn right towards Liverpool, which the current junction arrangement does not allow. The full part of the application also proposes the regrading of the site to create two flat development platforms. Part of the site would be raised, whilst others would be lowered. As part of the regrading works, landscape bunds would be formed on the southern, northeastern and northwestern boundaries of the site. An ecological area is also proposed to the southwest of the site. The outline part of the planning application proposes the erection of two commercial industrial buildings providing up to 135,000 square metres of employment floor space, which is primarily for logistics warehousing. The building shown on the indicative layout plan submitted with the application shows one building with a floor space of 85,000 square metres and one building with a floor space of 50,000 square metres. The larger building would have a maximum ridge height of 21.5 metres, and the smaller building would have a maximum height of 18.5 metres. Relative to the surrounding roads, they will be up to 27.5 metres and 23.5 metres higher than the A580, and up to 14 metres and just over 9 metres higher than the A58. And all of this is shown in the sections in your report pack between pages 156 and 158. The application is supported by a significant amount of information, including an environmental statement, and this is outlined in detail in the report. There's been a lot of interest in this planning application, and we've received a significant number of objections covering a variety of issues, and they're all summarised in the report. But just to clarify, since the agenda was published, we've had an additional 20 representations above the numbers stated at paragraph 4.3. 10 of these are people who've written in previously, and 5 are cycle-styled or repeat letters. An additional 6 letters notifying people of the planning committee date have also been returned to the council because the addresses that they were sent to did not exist, or the people the letters were addressed to did not live at the property the letter was sent to. For the most part, the new representations raise material issues that are already stated in the report. However, the following are additional. A comparison with the Amiga developments in Warrington is not valid, as there are no residential properties in the vicinity of that site. There is no suggestion in the application that the applicant is planning to develop transport links or public transport around the location of the proposed development. Concerns about the fact that the use of the warehouse is unknown. The noise that will result from these operations is cause for concern. The government strategy for regeneration of the northwest and the northeast has highlighted motorway congestion as a reason for regional decline, including junctions 22 and 23 of the M6. The opening of the Northern Logistics Academy at St Helens College does not demonstrate demand. Removing the bund and retaining trees as per the amended plan would make the development far more visible for residents along Liverpool Road. And the council should not determine the application at this stage, as the full impact of potential developments in the vicinity of the site have not been assessed. Specifically, proposals for land between the A580 and the A49 to the east of junction 23 of the M6, in accordance with the requirements of the EIA regulations. The majority of these points raised are addressed by the report, but in relation to consideration of the highway impact of the development to the east of junction 23, specific proposals for this site have only been recently forthcoming. And whilst officers have requested that the applicants address the point, it is our view that it would not be reasonable to require it because it is not a committed development. Clearly, if additional matters come to light before material matters come to light before the council determines the application, this will have to be considered further. And this is the approach we would take with any planning application. The Liverpool City Region LEP have also made a representation further to the one on page 57 of the report. The LEP have clarified that in the City Region there is limited availability of large logistics buildings. They believe that there is a market demand for buildings over 9,500 square metres and that this site would help to satisfy the market demand. Turning to the assessment of the planning application, the site is located in the Greenbelt. The erection of new buildings in the Greenbelt is inappropriate, and inappropriate development is by definition harmful, and development should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the harm by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The proposed development is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, so the main thing to consider is whether very special circumstances exist to outweigh the harm and whether there is any other harm such that planning permission should not be granted. The applicant's very special circumstances are fourfold. The first states that there is a need to develop the site because there is a need for large-scale logistics development in St Helens. The second states that there are no suitable sites available in the borough to meet this need. The third states that the development cannot be disaggregated. And the fourth states that the development will bring significant economic, social and environmental benefits. The Council's assessment of the position is that the core strategy states that there is a need for 37 hectares of employment land in the borough over the planned period to 2027. Since the adoption of the core strategy, there has been a net loss of around 35 hectares. In addition, an objectively assessed need, or an OAN, to 2037 states that St Helens needs a minimum of 174 hectares of employment land, and the demand for logistics buildings over 19,000 square metres would constitute approximately 60 to 70% of this need. These requirements are significantly different from the core strategy. The development of 37 hectares would make a significant contribution to the core strategy requirement, seemingly against the market trend, as well as to the high requirements in the OAN. Next, it is important to think about whether the development could be delivered. Is it attractive to the market? The evidence before the Council states that B8 warehousing and logistics require sites of more than 5 hectares, closer to the strategic road network and separate from sensitive uses. The application site generally meets this criteria. However, as the site is in the Greenbelt, there is a need to consider whether there are any alternatives, particularly within the urban area, that could meet the identified need. The evidence before the Council states that there are no such sites. Those sites identified over 5 hectares are being developed for other purposes or have access problems. The applicant has considered whether other Greenbelt sites could meet this need, but this is largely a moot point. The evidence before the Council shows that the development could not be disaggregated. There are no sites in the urban area that could accommodate the smaller or larger building individually, and 2 or 3 smaller buildings on different sites would not be attractive to the market and would not meet the identified need. The proposed development would represent an investment of £150 million into the borough, support over 2,000 jobs during the operational phase and 167 jobs during the construction phase, and it would also enhance access into Haydock Industrial Estate. In summary of the benefits, there is a need for employment land in the borough. The site will be attractive to the market. There are no other sites that could accommodate the development within the urban area, and the development cannot be disaggregated. In addition, the development would represent a large inward investment into the borough and support a number of jobs. When assessing the site, these matters should be given very significant weight in favour of the development. In terms of harm to the Greenbelt, the site is currently an agricultural field free from development. The proposal would therefore have a significant adverse impact on openness. The proposed development would also be contrary to 3 of the 5 purposes of including land within the Greenbelt, as it would constitute encroachment into the countryside, cause some sprawl beyond an existing built-up area, and it does not assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. These matters and the harm by reason of inappropriateness should be given substantial weight against the proposed development. Greenbelt policy also states that it is necessary to consider other harm caused by the development. This is discussed in detail in the report, but I will run through a few of the key points. Now, a number of the representations received make reference to the harm to the strategic and local highway network as a result of an increase in traffic. In relation to Haydock Island, this is a junction controlled by Highways England, who are a statutory consultee. Highways England have no objections to the impact of the development on the operation of Haydock Island and is satisfied that any additional development traffic can be accommodated without further works being undertaken. With regard to the local highway network, the proposed development would increase levels of traffic, but with the exception of the A580-A58 junction, in general this could be accommodated by the road network and would only cause limited harm. An improvement scheme has been proposed for the A580-A58 Liverpool Road junction, which would increase its capacity. The developer has agreed to make a financial contribution to the scheme. However, there is no absolute certainty that these works will be undertaken before the development begins to operate. So it's appropriate to take a precautionary approach and assess the impact on the junction unmitigated. And on this basis, the conclusion is that moderate harm will be caused. The MPPF is clear. It states that development should only be prevented or refused on transport grounds where the residual cumulative impact of development is severe. In this case, it has been demonstrated that the development would not cause severe harm. In relation to air quality, the development would increase levels of nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter. However, these increases would be negligible or limited, and with the exception of Park Cottage, there would be no exceedances of EU limits that are set to protect health. Some very limited harm would be caused because of the impact at Park Cottages and the impact on the M6 air quality management area. The developments would cause some limited harm to the landscape character of the area, and some moderate and limited harm to the occupants of properties on Liverpool Road because of its visual impact. The evidence shows that the noise impacts of the development can be controlled, so they do only marginally exceed the relevant standards in some cases. The level of this exceedance is negligible. The application demonstrates that the development could be implemented so that it does not increase the risk of flooding off-site. In terms of the planning balance, your office has considered that the contribution the development would make to the Council's employment land position is of significant and of particular importance, given there is a need of such a quantum and character. This and the other significant economic benefits are considered to outweigh the substantial harm caused to the Greenbelt and the other harm identified in the report. Consequently, the proposed development complies with the development plan as a whole and the MPPF. It is a sustainable development, and subject to the Secretary of State not wishing to call the application in, it should be granted planning permission subject to conditions and a unilateral undertaking. The recommended conditions have been set out in the report, but since its publication, the Coal Authority and MEAS have requested some minor amendments to 4 of the conditions, and officers have noticed a typo in a condition. So if you'd like to start on condition 8 on page 143, I'll talk you through the amendments to the conditions. Condition 8 has now been amended to widen the scope of the study to zones of influence around mine shafts. So it now reads, prior to the construction of the site access road, a programme of intrusive site investigations for the shallow coal workings and mine entries within the route of the access road and zones of influence instability of shafts located adjacent to the access road shall be submitted to and agreed in writing with the local planning authority. The agreed programme shall be implemented, and a report of the findings, including details of any necessary remedial works, shall be submitted to and agreed in writing with the local planning authority. The agreed remedial works shall be implemented. Condition number 9 has been amended to include a requirement to agree a programme of works, and it now reads, other than site clearance and investigation works, no development shall commence until a programme of intrusive site investigations for the shallow coal workings and mine entries has been submitted to and agreed in writing with the local planning authority. The agreed programme shall be implemented, and a report of the findings, including a scheme of mitigation remedial works for mine entries and shallow coal workings, shall be submitted to and agreed in writing with the local planning authority. The agreed remedial works shall be implemented. Condition number 10 has been amended so that other than site clearance and investigation works is deleted. And condition number 34 has been amended to include reference to zones of influence, so it now reads, Reserve matters applications for layout shall be informed by and accord with the report agreed under condition 10. If the buildings are over or within the zone of influence of recorded mine entries, this must be justified in the reserve matters submission. And finally, condition number 43 should read square metres rather than cubic metres. Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. We can now hear the objectors. I believe there are 7. I have Paul Parkinson to go first. If you want to sit there, please, Mr. Parkinson. I will, after each speaker has finished, to let everybody know how many minutes are left. We'll do it that way. So in your own time, please. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Parkinson. I'm a retired local government solicitor and I'm the chairman of the Residents Against the Florida Farm Development. Excuse me. We currently have about 1,960 members in our Facebook group. Could I request at this stage, sir, that when the time comes for a vote on this application, that a member of the committee proposes that a name vote be taken? And obviously it's a matter for the members. I'm just making a request. This development will destroy a much appreciated part of the borough with exceptional views. The land is actively farmed. It is not degraded farmland as the applicant suggests. And the public footpath crossing this gives access to open countryside for residents far and wide. As well as the loss of the greenbelt, I would ask members to consider the effect on the diverse wildlife of the area. And there isn't time to mention all of the wildlife. It is contained within the report. There are skylark, yellowhammer and linnet all present on the site. A flock of 60 lapwings have been recorded. All of these, together with a further 8 species, are on the red list of the species most threatened. The proposed ecological area cannot support these birds as they require arable farmland and the woodland that's proposed would not support them. There are also 4 species of bats recorded with roosts in the ancient woodlands that will be felled. The bats will go elsewhere because of the loss of the flight paths, navigation and feeding. The noise and light pollution will also be a major factor in this loss. And now dealing with what I can only basically be loosely described as an ecological area. The proposed 5-year plan that's put forward by the developer is flawed. There's no occupier of these properties to negotiate the management plan targets. No manager responsible for the actual management of the site. The landscaped area will be managed separately from the ecological area with a steering group to oversee both. There's an awful lot of speculation and no hard facts. There's no guarantee that any service level agreements would ever be achieved or monitored. And if they weren't, could the council afford to take over the management of this site? This area is of high greenbelt significance. Development would result in encroachment and a loss of the gap between the settlements of Haydock and Pewfall. I'm not going to rehearse the reasons why there is a green belt or what development is permitted. They're already set out in the report. This is inappropriate development in the green belt and is therefore by definition harmful. It should not be approved in very special circumstances. It's also a speculative development, so no very special circumstances can arise, as the applicant cannot provide evidence that there is a requirement for buildings of this size within the greenbelt. The applicant, however, attempts to prove that by setting out 4 strands to its argument. These are, firstly, an overriding need for logistics development in the area. Secondly, no alternative sites. 3, no alternative options. And 4, significant economic, social and environmental benefits. The Council, as you're all aware, has recently published its preferred options consultation document. That document specifically refers to identical developments to that proposed at Florida Farm North, namely land adjacent to Omega at Bold, to Parkside in Newton the Willows, and to land adjacent to Haydock Racecourse. Those sites wouldn't be in the preferred options unless the Council thought that they could be developed. On that basis, two of the very special circumstances, that is, no alternative sites and no alternative options, disappear. The applicants have failed to prove that there is an overriding need for such a development in St Helens. There may be a need for the development to serve the port of Superport in Liverpool, but that is a northwest regional asset. Logistics sites could be therefore located anywhere within the northwest. In any event, the Superport itself states that this type of development causes noise and visual pollution, and further states that commercially attractive logistics sites are now generally located away from residential areas for the above reasons. This, of course, is quite close to a number of residential properties, probably well over 200. The number of jobs to be generated is disputed by the objectors. The applicants appear to have based their figures on the number generated by development in Erith in London for Ocado. That development isn't due to open until the middle of this year. So the figure may be wildly inaccurate. No one can put an accurate figure on. A more accurate figure, however, is the number of employees at Sainsbury's in Haydock, the site there. The officer's report states that 1,500 people are employed there. In an email received last week from Sainsbury's, that reveals that the actual number of employees is 850, far below the 1,500 stated in the report. The visual impact of this is such that it's inappropriate development because of the impact it will have on the area due to its size, scale and location. These two monstrous warehouses will dominate the landscape, and no amount of planting will reduce the devastating impact that they will have on the environment and on the lives of the many hundreds of residents who live in close proximity. We, our children and future generation, will lose on many levels if this greenbelt land is destroyed. The very special circumstances referred to in paragraphs 87 and 88 of the National Planning Policy Framework do not exist in this instance. The potential harm to the greenbelt is not clearly outweighed by the benefits of the application. Permanent destruction of open countryside and the greenbelt for a speculative development is not justifiable. So therefore, it cannot be argued that very special circumstances exist to justify the granting of planning permission. I would therefore request that members refuse this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Andrew Burrows. Mr. Burrows, I've got just over 23 minutes still remaining on the 30-minute allocation. In your own time.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Andrew Burrows. I'm a resident of Calday Grove and I'm an independent transport consultant. I previously led Warrington Council's Highways Development Control Team for 6 years, so I'm well used to traffic problems. Members, in terms of traffic, this development is estimated to generate on average 6,700 vehicles per day, of which 1,400 per day will be HGVs. This would increase daily traffic flows on the East Lancs Road by around 24%. That's a very big increase in traffic and particularly big increase in HGVs. These figures are of course based on estimates. In reality, we don't know the eventual end user yet, and so traffic generation from the site could turn out to be even higher than this. Haydock Island. Members, I'm really quite disappointed that this proposal doesn't secure any highway improvements to junction 23 at Haydock Island, especially given the congestion and the existing problems at the junction that have been highlighted many times in objection letters by residents, by our own MP Conor McGinn, and in a formal objection letter to the proposals by the Makerfield MP Yvonne Favard. In my view, the traffic modelling submitted in support of the proposals underestimates the likely traffic impact of the development on Haydock Island. It makes no reference to the daily or weekly incidents which currently occur there, and it doesn't consider the impact of the operation of Haydock Park race meetings upon that junction. Councillors, a further almost identical warehouse development at Haydock Point is also waiting in the wings and is being promoted in the preferred options. If this Florida Farm application is approved tonight without contributions to highway improvements at Haydock Island, then surely none can be requested for the next application. And together these developments would increase traffic levels on the East Lancs Road by around 50% with no highways improvements to Haydock Island. The reported problems at the junction can only get worse. In terms of bus accessibility, councillors, in order to ensure that traffic problems in the area aren't worsened, it's important that future workers at the site will have access to quality public transport services. The site lies adjacent to the East Lancs Road, but as you'll no doubt be aware, there aren't any public transport services along that route. Indeed, the site is very poorly served in relation to public transport. Bus services should generally be provided within 400 metres of major employment locations, according to national guidance. The nearest bus services to Florida Farm will be 1,100 metres from the front door of the development. That is almost 3 times the recommended maximum walking distance to public transport services. And this excessive walking distance is in order to catch a 1 bus per hour service on Liverpool Road that doesn't even run into the evenings and doesn't properly cover the shift times of future workers. Such poor public transport accessibility will in fact worsen traffic problems, and this is a valid reason for refusal of this application, as the opportunities for sustainable transport modes haven't been taken up as required by paragraph 32 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Now, it may interest members to know that the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework requires public transport services to be introduced along the East Lancs Road in order to ensure good public transport access to developments taking place along the corridor in Wigan. Developments along the East Lancs in St Helens should, in my view, also be contributing to something similar in order to provide a realistic choice of travel to the site. Junction improvement works at Liverpool Road, East Lancs Road. The transport assessment submitted in support of the proposals noted that with the development in the year 2021, the Liverpool Road, East Lancs Road junction is predicted to operate at up to 120% of its actual capacity. The transport assessment notes that with the development, queues on Liverpool Road will increase from 28 to 42 vehicles, and queues on Stanley Bank Way will extend from 35 to 73 vehicles. In essence, the junction will be badly broken by the development and forecast traffic growth. This, again, is sufficient for the proposals to be refused on highways grounds, i.e., where there is a severe cumulative traffic impact in accordance with paragraph 32 of the National Planning Policy Framework. During the application process, however, in order to avoid recommending refusal on highways grounds, it appears that St Helens Council have invented a non-detailed highways improvement scheme at the Liverpool Road East Lancs Junction. Berrycoat have agreed to pay £500,000 out of a total £1.25 million cost, meaning that the remaining £750,000 cost is to come from the taxpayer at some point in the future. Members, I've lodged a formal complaint to the Council that this highway scheme is now being invented to allow this valid reason for refusal to be bypassed and for this issue to be sorted out later without any proper public consultation that should be taking place now as part of this planning process. There are currently no plans of what this junction improvement is within this application, and its impact in terms of how it mitigates or doesn't mitigate the congestion caused by the proposals at this junction hasn't been assessed and it hasn't been made public. It appears as though this highway improvement scheme hasn't been conditioned. There are no details on when it will be delivered or if it will be delivered, and there are no details regarding whether any further or any public consultation will take place regarding this scheme in the future. Members, just as residents shouldn't be kept in the dark on key issues within the planning process, so you are also entitled to be made fully aware of what you will be agreeing to when you are being asked to agree a highways scheme which may or may not occur and would commit £750,000 of public money towards it. No plans, just to reiterate, no plans have been presented in relation to this junction improvement, and this lack of detail is a fundamental flaw with this application. I'm therefore requesting that you refuse this application on the basis of its severe impact on the Liverpool Road East Lancs junction. Indeed, both of the reasons for refusal I've given you this evening, inadequate public transport and severe traffic impact at the Liverpool Road East Lancs junction, are, in my professional opinion, both completely justified and capable of being successfully defended at any future planning appeal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Can I ask, is it Dr. Rahil? Yes. Hope I've got your name right. That's correct. Oh, okay, that's great. Dr. Rahil, there is nearly 16 minutes left.
Thank you.
In the allocation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee, council members, ladies and gentlemen. As a health professional, I strongly believe that the current plans, if approved, will have detrimental effect on the public health due to air pollution generated by HGV traffic, general traffic, as well as the air pollution and light pollution generated due to excessive traffic, which will be subsequent to the current planning application. Our hospitals and primary care will be subject to severe financial implications, which outweighs any benefit of the rates collected. The current pollution levels are strongly already above the national and international levels and need to be reduced by 1/3. This is clearly stated in the Council Joint Commission reports between our CCG, or the Primary Care Trust, and the Public Health, as well as the current policy of the Council. It states in the, when our planner was giving the reasons, that the effect will be negligible. I strongly dispute that, because no one can predict how bad the traffic is going to be in the next 2-3 years following the full development of this large scale. The current figures given is only based on assumption. We need to reduce the current pollution to 50 microgram per cubic meter, and this is the requirement if we need to have a healthy environment surrounding St. Helens. There will be a significant rise in the serious level in air and light pollution, as I stated. Subsequently, this will cause rise of relevant diseases, physical and psychological, as follows. I'm going to list some of them. COPD, obstructive airway disease, asthma, lung cancer, and other respiratory diseases. The children in particular, they will be at risk, and also certain age group of adults, which is 50 to 59. This is statistically clearly stated in the Council relevant documents, which has been published year on year since 2013. Also, there will be increase in the cardiac and vascular diseases, which will increase significantly relative to the air pollution. It's estimated that 12% the increase in this area is expected. There will be an increase in road traffic accidents, mainly because of the excessive and heavy traffic generated. It has been stated in one of the documents of the Council published, it's 3,132 accidents occurred until August 2016. 20% of those people who were hurt during these accidents needed long-term treatment and follow-up. The death rate relevant to children, was included in these accidents, and it says that in St. Helens, we have a higher death rate in children because of road traffic accidents, which is higher than what's stated in the Northwest, as well as the country in general. So we are at high risk here in these young ones. The air pollution will cause dementia, depression, anxiety. All are caused by air pollution. If somebody listened to the Granada reports or read any statistics or research done in Harvard University and other local universities in our country, they will significantly understand, because of the inhaled particles generated by pollution, it will cause the dementia, depression, and anxiety. I keep stressing this because it's extremely important, and it will reflect on our well-being, mainly in the area surrounding the stated development. The light pollution, it will be lit all night, and urban sky glow will cause poor sleep, stress, anxiety, depression, and poor concentration in those who will be attempted to go to work. Something else not mentioned, the noise and vibration can cause depression, as well as anxiety, and hearing loss and tinnitus. 1 in 10 of people living in the close proximity to the area, they may suffer some form of hearing impairment. The other thing which I'd like to mention also, there's no guarantee that the employment is going to be full-time, which will generate welfare for the people, and all will feel happy, and there'll be tax collected, and there'll be more money to be spent on health and welfare. There could be a certain percentage will be subject to be, certain people will be employed as to do 0 hours and agency work, and this means low income, no sick pay, poor pension, depression. People become more dependent on social welfare and the state. Therefore, I would ask you to reflect and consider the risk involved to the population physically, psychologically, and socially, and refuse the current plans, and to stop St. Helens from being returned to a very polluted place, and to protect our future generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahir.
Thank you.
Can I now call Dr. Barton? Dr. Barton, there's just over 10 minutes left on the clock.
Right, thank you. Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Barton. I'm a healthcare professional with over 40 years of experience. I'm therefore qualified to speak on matters and concerns arising with the health of our community that have not been addressed satisfactorily within the report. Members, I wish to draw on your attention to amenity, health and well-being, where there are many examples of verbatim quotes of people's real and valid concerns regarding their health should this bill go ahead. The voices are powerful, and they ask you to consider their plight. The planners have not addressed the issues adequately under the heading of health. It is said that this bill could directly and adversely affect up to 1,158 people's health, yet it is tried to justify their loss of health by stating that this will be offset by the supposed number of people that will be employed from the St. Helens area, which they themselves quote as being 525. Therefore, over twice as many people's lives are to be blighted than will be improved within St. Helens. So taking those figures, I want to apply them to the issues of people's psychological and mental well-being that is not best served or explicit within this report. The report concentrates on the emotive subject of lives saved through employment, yet it does not touch on lives lost, nor the biopsychosocial or mental health issues that are highly likely to arise should this bill go ahead. 1,158 people have begun to live the nightmare of having a neighbour from hell imposed upon them. They have no escape. Nightmare neighbours have a devastating effect on a person's mental health and general quality of life. It is known that stress over time is devastating, and this stress is never, ever going to go away. Therefore, the likelihood of rising mental health issues for the community is real, as is the associated biopsychosocial impact. St. Helens in the core plan actually said that these sort of warehouses should be built away from residential areas, and for justified reasons. Yet here we are today trying to stop it. The writers of the report may wish to say that these points are implicit within other reports. This should be challenged as it is a separate subject and therefore should have its own important platform and supported by evidence-based research. In St Helens, there are more disabled and sick people when compared to the national population. Both of these damning statistics indicate a sick town, and this build will only make it worse. The health impact report is flawed as it is based upon a rapid health impact assessment and has not included broader stakeholder involvement. To vote to pass this application is a massive mistake when the adverse impact to health is likely to be catastrophic on the already above average sick population of St Helens. Members, to summarise, the facts are that this build is going to negatively affect more people than it is going to help. A wider scope of impact was not completed. It is therefore making the passing of these plans a deadly, deadly mistake. We know that no man or plan is an island, and illness within our population affects us all. And I thank the members for your attention and ask that you will consider the objections that I have presented in opposition to the build on behalf of the residents and, more importantly, your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The fifth speaker I've got is Cardine McClymont. Is that correct? Sorry, Caroline. My apologies. There's 6.5 minutes left.
Right, good evening. My name is Caroline McClymont and I'm the chair of the Blackbrook Flood Group. The Strategic Flood Risk Assessment from St Helens Council states that developers have a vital role in ensuring local flood risk management by avoiding development in areas at risk of flooding. This statement should be considered by the Planning Committee when deciding whether to grant permission to Berwickhope to build upstream of a Category 3 flood zone, where residents of Blackbrook West End Road have experienced substantial internal flooding of their properties several times in recent years due to the overtopping of Clipsley Brook, and who now have a 1 in 3 chance of experiencing another flood event. Clipsley Brook has been identified as one of the 10 significant areas at risk of surface flooding in St Helens. The capacity and the management are an existing problem, and it's the main source of flooding in Blackbrook. This could be addressed, but no funding means that nothing can go forward to mitigate the situation. We will also not receive any of the millions of pounds the government has recently pledged for flooding defences. JBA has identified that surface water flooding from land neighbouring the proposed development site is a main concern. The development will impact on this, thus increasing flood risk elsewhere. Yet it seems that in the Hydrock report, attenuation into Clipsley Brook is the answer to site drainage. The proposed plans lack suitable information on managing water on site and preventing it from draining into Clipsley Brook. The proposed attenuation ponds are designed to cater for a storm return period of 1 in 100 years plus 20%. This is the basic standard stated in government guidelines. St Helens has no betterment policy. Pre-application, the Council have pushed for 1 in 100 years plus 50% to accommodate climate change and increase sustainability. However, the developer, with lack of information on the effectiveness of the proposed sustainable urban drainage systems, are pursuing the basic acceptable standard. This is not betterment. Most councils aim for 1 in 100 years plus 30%. Some, such as Greater London, aim for 50% and a few 80%. We all need to go beyond standard guidance and do better to secure improved flood management in order to protect our towns and cities for the future. The developer has proposed to reduce the runoff rate to Q-bar, but all their proposals are centred on a post-development rather than pre-development scenario. A scenario is neither fact or assurance that this development will not increase flood risk. Clipsley Brook is culverted at West End Road. This culvert is in poor condition as identified in the St Helens Council Flood Risk Asset Register. Environmental agency modelling showed that relining the culvert could reduce flood risk. Lack of funding stopped this being pursued. It remains in the same poor condition. More surface water means more pressure on the culvert, which will in turn exacerbate existing flooding problems. The JBA report still has a lot of important details still to be confirmed by the developer, such as percolation rates, how they address the non-viable infiltration rates, why restricting the rate of discharge to Q-bar is the most appropriate solution. There are still too many unanswered questions at this stage. Proposals to intersect and attenuate surface water within the proposed site drainage may reduce the available storage on site, yet Berwick Court proposed controlling the runoff from the site post-development and retaining more water on site for longer. Overland water is proposed to be captured by a filter drain and directing flows into Clipsley Brook, the cause of the flooding to the residents of West End Road. The addition of another flood relief pond adjacent to Clipsley Brook, independent of the Sud system, is proposed to store water up to 270 metres cubed. Where will this water infiltrate to? Hydrock indicate their proposed measures will provide significant betterment. There is no indication of what percentage the betterment will be. Calculations of an outfall of surface water into Clipsley Brook are at best equivalent to the current Greenfield runoff rate. There is no betterment. The plans for this development, no betterment, no pre-development measures and no assurance that it will not exacerbate current flooding issues are reasons enough not to grant planning permission. Flooding massively impacts on victims' lives and health, and it seems that councils are too quick to give the go-ahead to massive developments that in the end have a negative rather than a positive impact on the surrounding communities. 12 months on from the flooding in 2015 on Boxing Day, I am just now repairing our home. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Can I ask Colin Walker? Mr. Walker? There's only 2 minutes left of the allocated time, Mr. Walker.
Okay, my name's Colin Walker. I'm an ADOC resident and I'm also engineering director of an established St Helens business. With the expansion of Liverpool docks and the new Panamax container handling terminal, we are going to see an increased demand for modern warehouse developments across the Liverpool city region, which includes the borough of St Helens, hopefully bringing about new jobs as well. I say hopefully because the jobs figures that are banded about more often than not are not correct to the people of St Helens. These misleading figures usually include out-of-town contractors and subcontractors involved in the build of these new developments. However, of the 2,500 jobs quoted for this plan, construction work is excluded from these figures. My experience of contractors and subcontractors involved in construction projects in St Helens is that their workforce is brought in from outside the St Helens borough, and in some cases from outside the North West region itself. This was even evident with the build of the new Saints rugby ground, whereby lots of local businesses were interested in supporting the project, but very few were utilised. So the job figures stated on that particular project were not relevant to the St Helens locality. So I asked, why can't some of this construction work and these construction jobs go to businesses in St Helens? Even more, why can't some of the support services for this construction work go to supporting businesses like mine in St Helens? If the planning applicants and the businesses that they represent want to build in our town, and our council are keen for them to do so, then I strongly suggest that they utilise local businesses as subcontractors and support businesses to both the main and other subcontractors involved. I am not implying a restriction of trade to the contractors by stating they can only use St Helens businesses, but if other councils can utilise negotiated trade agreements with contractors, then why can't these construction and support jobs also go to the town of St Helens? Without this, I, and probably many other local businesses, maintain my objection to this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brooks. I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks, I've only got 10 seconds on the clock. Believe it or not.
All I can say then is I fully agree with what my fellow...
If you'll sit down, I was going to suggest I'll give you an extra 10 seconds because I don't want you standing up. 20 seconds.
All I can say, I agree entirely with what my fellow speakers have said to you. But what I have come for really is to you probably know that by now. I live in Haydock. I was born and bred up Haydock Lane. My house faced this field that you're talking about, and I know it like the back of my hand. That field is like a sponge, and the springs in that field
I'm sorry, but your,
All right.
your time's up. We understand what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. There are 3 councillors that wish to speak. I've got Councillor Burns to speak first. 3 minutes, councillor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Put quite simply, this is the largest application or the biggest application to come to Haydock in a generation. However, the ramifications of each course of action are far from simple. Before I begin, though, I do want to make some comments regarding the conduct of a very small minority of people who are against this application, who have used hurtful language with threats of violence to elected members, from being labelled as having a mental illness by someone who should know better, to having threats directed at us and our families. Just as disturbing and disgusting as some of the racist remarks made toward the leader of our council as he's recuperating from serious illness in hospital. This is unacceptable behaviour and a real shame to the group against, because I know the majority of the people who have campaigned hard along with the Residents Against group would also agree that this behaviour does not reflect their beliefs. I started by saying, Chair, that this is once in a generation, and it really is. The future generations will judge this as a pivotal point in Haydock's history, and there are no easy answers here. As we look towards the future and a plan for growth, it is essential that we listen to the voice of all of our residents to ensure they have their say in the future of our borough. We need to make sure that the people we represent get the best possible deal for the future. So let us look at the subjects surrounding this development. There has been no secret made to the continuous unfair cuts we receive from central government, and this isn't just a political point. While leafy Tory heartlands lie unaffected, areas like ours are under serious pressure, and this trend continues, and as it does, councils like ours will be unable to meet even our statutory duties due to the budget pressures, and this is a very serious point. We're talking about the most vulnerable people in society. For example, those currently receiving social care, who may not get that same package in the future. People who need help to eat and clean and do the most basic daily routines that you and I take for granted. What happens to those in the future? Then there is the subject of employment, and this is something that is very much needed for the residents of our borough. As a Labour councillor, I am very much an advocate for ensuring the care of the most vulnerable in our communities and the creation of employment opportunities and prosperity for our current and future generations. However, this does not mean at any price. It seems a very short time ago when we arranged a public meeting in the Assembly Hall when residents came to air their views, and after listening to their views, we discussed the planning process. We raised their concerns to the developer on their behalf, and the residents have also inputted into this process. These Haydock residents have worked tirelessly, aligning their concerns to material planning objections, and deserve a huge amount of credit for their work, particularly some of our speakers today, and I'd just like to mention Paul Parkinson and his wife Glenys, who worked very hard on this campaign. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Jeanette Banks next, please. Again, Jeanette, 3 minutes, please.
I'm speaking as a Haydock councillor in support of the residents who are objecting to this application. The matter has caused a lot of worry, concern and in some cases fear and anger in Haydock. The way in which these feelings have manifested themselves have, in the main, been focused on the issues, and I'm sure all of us would agree that the document sent to you is something the residents' opposition group can be proud of. Most of the Haydock residents who have objected to this application have done themselves credit. That said, I have been upset by some of the less savoury things that have also been said, but I urge you not to let those things affect your decision in this matter. As ward councillors under enormous pressure from both sides of the application, Anthony and I have judged it purely on its merits, listening to the arguments for and against. This application is set against the background of huge financial pressures on the council, and regeneration is the best way, aside from a change of government, to alleviate these pressures. We do need quality jobs for local people, but not at any cost. The loss of green spaces in an urban area is something that must be considered very carefully. These fields are home to diverse wildlife and plant life, as well as holding water after storms that would otherwise flow down to the Ship Inn and flood the houses there. With the scale of this development, once it has been taken away, it won't be replaced. I have real worries about the impact of this application on the levels of traffic and of pollution that it will cause. Haydock Island, although recently updated, is still not an easy junction at peak times. Many more lorries will be using the A580, and at present the infrastructure is just about coping. Unless the Highways Agency can devise a plan to alleviate this problem, it will only get worse. If the HGVs aren't polluting of themselves, the cars, vans and buses that are stuck on the East Lancs alongside them will be. And how many more lorries are going to try and come down Haydock Lane or onto Clipsley and Church Road when the East Lancs grinds to a halt? Any benefit to the local economy could be offset with the cost of treating lung disease, asthma, etc. It's an urban area already suffering from traffic problems. As an asthmatic myself, who has lived for 16 years near the A580, and for the past 16 years I've lived next to the landfill site, I think residents deserve to be protected from any more pollution. The objectors have gone into detail in their rebuttal document, and I share many of their concerns. I can only touch upon what worries me the most in this allotted time, and I ask you to consider these concerns when making your decision. There is a balance to be found in this application, and as someone with the privilege of representing the area I was born and grew up in, I believe the objections decisively tilt the balance against approval, particularly due to the negative effect the development will have on the residents closest to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Banks. Councillor Macaulay. Again, Councillor, 3 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm here tonight in support of this application, as I believe that the special conditions requirement to build on Greenbelt have been met as set out in the committee report. But I'd first like to concentrate on jobs and the need for jobs in the borough. The application indicates over 2,000 jobs will be created. Even if this figure is 50% out, that's still over 1,000 jobs. St Helens, as you probably know, is the 16th most deprived out of the 326 boroughs nationally with regards to employment opportunities. This is exaggerated in some of our more deprived wards, such as Parr, Town Centre, Earlstown, and my own ward of Thatterweath, to name but a few. And each other borough in the ward has also got pockets of deprivation, including Haydock. We have over 3,000 people known to be looking for work in the borough, so the jobs are very much needed. No one in an ideal world would want to build on green spaces, but unfortunately we don't live in that ideal world and have to take each application on its own merits. As the report identifies, this green belt is far from good agricultural land, and as again identified in the report, was once home to more than 18 mine shafts, a legacy of our industrial heritage. St Helens was built on industry and the minerals beneath our feet. Now those industries have mainly gone due to national industrial policies, but this is an opportunity to fight back. We're at a crossroads, and the decision you've got in front of you, as I see it, is to take the growth and prosperity path, or take the other path to manage decline. You have the opportunity to kickstart the growth in the borough, to say St Helens is open for business and we welcome inward investment and job opportunities for those in our communities that we represent. If you join the dots, the more money in people's pockets equals greater disposable incomes and the attraction of shops to our town centre and local centres. Much has been made of health issues, but our own public health team and the independent assessment says this application will have a positive effect on health of the borough, as the best way to a healthy life is to be in employment. Far too many of our youngsters leave the borough to find good jobs further afield and never return. I have 3 beautiful grandchildren and I want the best for them as I do my constituents, and the best should be on their doorstep. That includes good job prospects. And if you are minded to support this application tonight, can I suggest that condition 3 and condition 29 are tightened to ensure recruitment is targeted to our deprived areas, and a condition be added to ensure that good public transport links to those communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. I have Michael Watts for the applicant stroke agent, and is Mr Wilson going to speak later? Yes. So it's 30 minutes between you again, and I will obviously tell you when you've finished how much time's left. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the committee. My name is Mike Watts of Nathaniel Litchfield and Partners. We're the planning consultants for the Berrycoats. Firstly, I note that the planning officer recommends that planning permission should be granted, and the applicant fully supports that recommendation. The applicant appreciates that this is a greenbelt site and that in normal circumstances it should not be built on. It is for the developer, therefore, to show that very special circumstances exist to justify the grant of permission. The question, therefore, is whether there are such circumstances in this case. The answer is unequivocally yes. Briefly, an overriding need for the provision of large-scale logistics buildings in St Helens, both to meet the economic needs of the borough and the wider needs of the Liverpool City region linked to the Superport. The lack of alternative sites and options that could accommodate the proposed development within the urban area, or indeed outside of the urban area in the Greenbelt. The suitability of the site adjacent to an existing industrial estate and close to the strategic highway network, and the economic, social and environmental benefits that are associated with the scheme, not least the very large number of jobs, which Mr Wilson from Berrycoat will elaborate on. Your officers have set out in the report that these matters meet the very special circumstances tests for development in the Greenbelt. The principle of the proposed development is therefore acceptable. However, we accept that the development of this scale raises a number of technical issues. As members will be aware from the report, all of these matters have been addressed in the environmental statement and various detailed technical reports, and I would highlight our approach to a number of these issues. Firstly, the applicant accepts that the development will generate HGV traffic and private vehicle movements on the surrounding road network. However, the detailed modelling analysis that has been undertaken and validated by your officers shows that the surrounding roads can take these movements without harm to driver, pedestrian or cyclist safety or any increase in congestion, and that is also accepted by the Highways Agency. The proposed new junction on the A580 will actually help by controlling traffic movements and providing safe crossing places. It will also take traffic away from Peel Road, with benefits for those living nearby, and provide easier access into the industrial estate. As 1.4 million square feet of floor space is proposed, the applicant accepts that the buildings are big. That said, the applicant has reduced the potential impact by the orientation of the buildings and by lowering the site levels and providing substantial bunds around the site with planting. This minimises the views of the buildings so they will not have an unacceptable impact on the landscape. Ecological surveys have been undertaken, and there is very little of value which is to be expected with arable fields. The applicant is providing 6 acres of new woodland with ponds that will create an attractive and improved habitat for wildlife, and this can be conditioned. Detailed noise and air quality assessments have been undertaken. The development will not lead to unacceptable noise and air pollution, and this also can be conditioned in terms of the mitigation. And this has also been accepted by your environmental health officer. Finally, the development incorporates substantial water attenuation ponds. That means that there will be no more runoff during high levels of rainfall than the current position, and indeed the Environment Agency has not objected to the proposals. There will instead be a benefit downstream because of the additional size of ponds that are provided. The applicant has therefore addressed all of the technical issues, and the scheme is acceptable, and this is set out in detail in your report. In conclusion, there is an immediate and significant requirement for large-scale employment sites in the borough. It has been clearly demonstrated that this site is suitable to deliver those jobs, and the proposed development will provide additional benefits over and above that. The scheme therefore accords with the development plan taken as a whole, and in the words of the National Planning Policy Framework, should be granted without delay. I would therefore urge you members to support the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wilson, 25 minutes. You don't need that long. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Keith Wilson of Berrycote, and I'm the project director for this development. You've already heard from Mike addressing the planning aspects. I'd now really like to focus on the wealth of benefits which will be delivered by this development. In short, we believe that this £150 million development will be the biggest single investment in St Helens in a generation or more. The biggest investment in St Helens in a generation. What an opportunity for the town this represents. I live locally, just over a mile from the town boundary, and would take great pride in delivering this lasting legacy. But what is the alternative? We acknowledge that developing on Greenbelt is a difficult decision to take. This is the first time in our 10 years of Berrycote we've ever promoted a greenfield site, but it's born out of necessity. There simply aren't any brownfield sites for this development. But this isn't just a challenge for St Helens. These tough decisions are currently being taken in towns and cities throughout the UK. Look at Greater Manchester at the moment, with the spatial framework currently being consulted on. This proposes the release of over 12,000 acres of greenbelt for employment and housing development over the next 20 years. Not to encourage investment is not merely to stand still. It will mean St Helens goes backwards. As Councillor Macaulay was describing, potentially a spiral of decline as businesses are forced to locate in towns and cities with a vision to bring forward the lifeblood that is land supply. But what does our proposed investment mean? Primarily, it's about creating employment opportunities for the local community. As a minimum, 2,500 jobs will be created, and depending on the specific uses, it could be more than double that amount, and that's not forgetting the 400 construction jobs that we've described. And these jobs are real and will be delivered. Berrycote have delivered facilities for many blue chip companies nationally. Rolls-Royce, Asda Walmart, Tesco, Sainsbury's and Ocado amongst others. And these facilities have without exception resulted in significant employment generation. The Ocado facility will employ 3,500 people from a building less than half the size of this development. And these jobs are wide-ranging, and for many people, the first step in a fulfilling career in logistics. Our facilities offer a whole range of employment opportunities. Warehouse operatives, office administrators, drivers, software designers, and senior management positions. And the fact that our scheme includes over 100,000 square foot of offices, it's a clear indication of the amount of office-based roles that will be provided. Engineers too. The role of automation is playing an increasingly significant role in distribution, but contrary to some views, is actually resulting in more higher skilled roles. It takes highly trained engineers to keep all this automation moving so that customers receive their internet shopping when they're expecting it. And these jobs will benefit local people. Berrycote are committed to ensuring that local people get the first opportunity to secure these jobs. As is described in our application, we'll implement a local employment strategy working closely with key local partners, such as the newly launched Northern Logistics Academy operated by St Helens College. This will ensure that local workers have the necessary training and experience to take full advantage of this and other local job opportunities. And this strategy also applies to the construction jobs that we will be providing. And it isn't just about this site. Our proposals are an extension to the Haydock Industrial Estate, which includes delivering an upgraded highways access from the East Lancs into the existing estate. This will build momentum for further investment and job creation in Haydock. And well-designed schemes can also bring a lot of environmental benefits. The buildings will have world-class sustainability credentials. We're giving over 25% of the site to green areas, including the planting of over 25,000 new trees and shrubs, and a 6-acre publicly accessible woodland park on the site. And we've already reached an agreement with a woodland management charity to manage this area going forward, so that isn't in doubt. So when will this investment be delivered? Demand from occupiers for these type of buildings is extremely strong in the northwest, and there's a severe shortage of availability. We're in detailed discussions with operators and will conclude deals quickly to commence construction later this year. The first building will be operational before the end of 2018. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there's a number of points of clarification officers wish to assist us with. Is it you, Mrs. Hale?
Perhaps if I can just explain, Chair, we're going to take the planning points between Mark Allen and myself, and then we'll hand over to Fiona and Mike on the technical, highways and environmental health matters, if that's all right.
That's fine, great.
Thanks, Chair. There was reference made to what's happening with the ecological area and the bunds around the site. Well, there is a management plan which is required under condition number 16 of, well, recommended under condition number 16 in the report. That will require that to be implemented for the lifetime of the development. And we can enforce that condition if there has been a breach of that planning condition. In relation to the point touching on whether it's a speculative development, yes, it is a speculative development, and that's made clear in the officer's report. I think the officer report also makes clear that there is a need for this kind of development, and we do believe that this site will be attractive to meet that need. It's not uncommon. The council's own evidence shows that it's not uncommon for developments like this to be made on a speculative basis. And again, that's all covered in your reports on paragraph 7.34 to 37. There was mention made to the preferred options plan. That plan is at a very early stage, and it can only be given very little weight. And again, that's made clear in your report. The other sites referred to all lie within the green belt. And again, that's addressed in 7.45 of the report. It's not considered that they would be sequentially preferable to this site. And there are no proposals currently before the council on those sites. Turning to some of the flooding issues, we can't address existing problems. We know there's issues with Blackbrook, and we have had a number of discussions about this. That being said, we are content with the proposals that are in front of us. The lead local flood authority have no objections, and Environment Agency have no objections to the scheme. There was a reference made to the detail of some of the drainage. The detail for the drainage schemes are required under conditions 18 and 41, which are recommended in your report. Regarding using existing businesses and local labour, we can't force applicants to do so. But that being said, we have recommended some conditions which do require, well, do encourage the use of local labour, local construction firms during both the operational and construction phases of development. Yeah, and that's me.
Just a couple of points on particularly what Mr Burrows said in relation to the highways matters, and I'm going to hand over to Fiona, who's going to talk about some of the more technical things. But and firstly, we don't know who the end user is. That's absolute fact. It is a speculative development, and so we can't say for certain X amount of traffic. But when you're determining a planning application, you have to look at what's reasonable and you have to look at what's likely, and that's what's in front of you at the moment. Otherwise, you'd end up not determining and refusing every single planning application. These matters have been considered by suitably qualified officers, both on behalf of the local authority and Highways England, and both of them have concluded the impact is satisfactory. In terms of committee developments, and Alan said it in his his presentation at the beginning. We have begun pre-application discussions on a site to the east of Junction 23. That has come up very late in the process on this application. It arose in November when this application's been with us since something like June. It isn't a committed development. We don't have a planning application in front of us. And so it would be unreasonable for us to require that information. We have asked for it on the grounds that it would make sense. But to require it and to refuse a planning application on the fact that we haven't had that information, in our view, would not be sustainable. The point was made that if no highway improvements are required, particularly in relation to Junction 23, off the back of this development, that we wouldn't then be able to secure any further improvements off the back of other developments. That's not the case. Each application has to be determined on its own merits. If an application comes forward in the future that shows an adverse impact on Junction 23, and bearing in mind it is Highways England's asset and they are requiring improvements to that junction, be it by commuted sum or by physical works, for them to recommend, for them to not object to the proposal, then that is what we will seek to try and secure. In relation to the status of the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, that is a draft document that is out to consultation. It is very much in line with where we are with the local plan. It does not have any status, it has very little weight, and so any requirements contained therein, the Greater Manchester authorities are not in a position to enforce at the moment, much like we are ourselves. In terms of the junction improvement at Liverpool Road, and there was some very emotive language used about we've invented a junction improvement to try and make this development happen. The National Planning Policy Framework is very, very clear on this point, and paragraph 32, and you have it in the consultation response in your report, and it says, improvements can be undertaken within the transport network that cost effectively limit the significant impacts of the development. That is an absolutely legitimate course of action for the councils to take as local planning authority. It doesn't have to be a scheme that's in the pipeline that we wheel out. If there is a scheme, a legitimate scheme that we think can facilitate this development and makes it acceptable, the National Planning Policy Framework says that that's something that we can do. What we've decided to do, however, is take a pragmatic approach, because we recognise that the growth in traffic over that period is only going to, the development's only going to make a contribution to the problems, and that the council will have to look at that junction. And that's why we've looked at a contribution. To ask them to completely reinvent that junction would be unreasonable in our view. So no, we haven't committed the council or the developer via a condition to improving that junction. We've secured a contribution via a unilateral undertaking. You cannot attach conditions requiring money to be paid. That's not legally possible. But what we have done is then assess the junction without that improvement taking place. And your office's view is that the impact is moderate. And on that basis, because it doesn't hit the test of severe, in our view, it's acceptable without that junction improvement in any case.
Thank you. Just a quick couple of points. I think it was Mr Parkinson's reference, he said they'd had an email from Jay Sainsbury's saying there was 850 employees. We actually rang Sainsbury's yesterday and the economic development team, and the response that we got, put my glasses on, is that there is 1,851 jobs at Sainsbury's. And with regard to Councillor Macaulay's request that Condition 3 and 29 refer to super output areas or those with deprivation. We can insert, if you wish, if you are minded to grant planning permission, we can insert that reference in those two conditions.
In relation to the couple of other issues raised by Mr Burrows.
Can I just ask you, Fiona, to speak up, please?
Sorry.
It's not very clear from where I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in relation to the additional issues raised by Mr Burrows, it is acknowledged that additional traffic will be generated by the proposed development. However, the modelling which has been undertaken of the junctions identifies that the junctions have the capacity to be able to cope with it without generating a severe impact. It's also worth bearing in mind that the figures quoted are daily flows, they're 24-hour flows, and it doesn't take into account that they'll be distributed over a wide transport network. When you look at the peak hour traffic flows, you're talking about 161 light vehicles, 46 heavy good vehicles in the AM peak, 199 light vehicles, 41 heavy goods vehicles in the PM peak. When you actually break that down, you're talking about one additional light vehicle every 20 seconds in and out of the development, and less than one heavy good vehicle every 90 seconds. And when that's actually distributed over the highway network, we don't believe that that's a severe impact. In relation to the point over Haydock Island, as Mel's already discussed slightly, Highways England are responsible for the operation of the junction, and they have been consulted on, and they have undertaken their own modelling of the impact, and they are satisfied that the development does not have a severe impact. In relation to the accessibility, and particularly the bus accessibility issues raised, there are 2 bus stops which have been provided within the site to support the proposed development. In addition, Merseytravel do undertake a biannual review of their bus services within the area, and the increase in employee numbers to the site will help generate sufficient demand to justify potential expansions to the existing bus services.
Okay, with regard to impacts of noise and air quality, the environmental reports provided by the applicant are considered to be thorough and robust, and have received a great deal of scrutiny from environmental scientists employed in my section with expertise in the fields of air quality, noise and vibration. With regard to noise, it's considered that with mitigation as stated, the nationally adopted standards both internal and external living environments can be met and not significantly elevated above existing. I would emphasise that the standards used are in effect health-based standards. With regard to air quality, overall it is considered that development will not have a significant adverse impact on air quality, as you've read in the report in some detail. The predicted air quality impacts will in most cases be negligible and slight at just a small number of receptors, I think 4. Of these, excuse me. However, with those experiencing a slight impact, as I stated, they're stated within the report. Of these properties assessed, none will experience an exceedance of the EU limit value in relation to NOx or PM10. However, park cottages would experience levels of NO2 above the air quality objective of 4 micrograms per cubic metre. This property is already in an air quality management area and would experience an exceedance even without the development going ahead. It's acknowledged in the report that some very limited harm will be caused at this location because of the development, though this is classed as slight, and so in the region it's less than 2 micrograms per cubic metre in terms of a contribution. As a result of this, conditions have been recommended to compensate. I'm not really qualified, and it's not also my report, so in terms of the health impact assessment that's been produced, so I'm wary of really commenting further on that, but I think I would welcome the findings of that report. Health and air quality are obviously inextricably linked, and it's obviously of great interest. I value the report, and what I do note from that, and I've got to trust the professionals who've produced it, who are health professionals. The assessment concludes that the overall impact as a result of development is likely to be positive on health.
Just to clarify, Chair, much of what Dr Barton talked about was the consultation response received from Public Health, which is contained in section 3 of your report. Again, we asked for a health impact assessment to be undertaken. That was the response that we received. You've basically got it in front of you. verbatim as an independent assessment of the application.
Thank you all for that. That was very helpful. It's a very complex issue tonight, but now it's up to members to speak. I think Councillor Fulham has raised his hand. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just 2 queries of the officers, please. Hopefully they'll be addressed quite quickly. One was, and it's just for clarity, the officer for highways made reference to biannual, as in 6 monthly Mersey-Travel reviews, rather than biennial, which is 48 monthly reviews. Is that correct? You said biannual.
It will be once every 2 years. It's biannual.
Okay, thank you. And the other clarification was Mr. Kilroe made reference at the beginning of the evening's committee with reference to a number of correspondence and objectors with whom we've not been able to successfully correspond. Is that number in addition to the numbers referenced in paragraph 4.3 on page 58, where at least 16 people have been in contact to say they had no knowledge of an objection being made in their name, although I appreciate that that volume is quite small relative to the total number of objectors?
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks, Chair. Politics is about choices, and the colliery that is before us entered into the Green Belt when the colliery was shut down in the 80s, leaving a legacy of underemployment in this borough. And it's a problem that we've had around our neck for the last several decades, and we continue to have serial underemployment of people in this borough, and that is relative to the Northwest and it's relative to the UK at large. However, the test before us, as you know too well, Chair, is a clear, defined and is purely a planning test, and that's what we need to consider today. And the test has been outlined very clearly, and the applicant says that it is met on 4 legs. And just turning to some of those legs, if you bear with me one moment, Chair. They say there is a need to develop the site because there are no alternative sites left in the borough for them to develop. And I agree with them. There are sites in the borough that are vacant. There are sites in the borough that need regeneration, but none of those sites meet their needs. And I think that test is met. Can the site be disaggregated so it can fit into the sites that are vacant within the borough? And the report demonstrates it cannot be disaggregated. In fact, the opportunity would vanish up the M6 to the next nearest motorway junction if the site was disaggregated. So that leaves us with the 4th test. What are the socio-economic benefits? And are they considerable to outweigh the harm that is done to the removal of a slice of Greenbelt? Because let's not forget that over 65% of St Helens is still Greenbelt. And this represents a fraction of that 65%. Now, I'm not going to repeat the weight of evidence that's been presented before us, especially the independent reports prepared by the professionals and officers, but it is my view that Councillor Macaulay sums it up succinctly, that there is a considerable benefit to be obtained by approving this application because of the jobs that it would procure for this borough, and some of them will filter out into neighbouring boroughs. I've no doubt about that at all. There are other issues to turn to, and Ms Kleinmount, and I hope I've pronounced her name correctly, made reference to the significant problems of flooding that parts of the borough, and in particular Blackbrook, suffer from. And that is unfortunate. But the way the planning regime works is it's not upon the applicant to fill the vacuum of public funding that this Tory government has created by pulling funding out of St Helens, and the measures that they have taken with the attenuation pools are quite significant, and there are other things that the council is doing. For example, in my ward in Mossbank, which is adjacent to Blackbrook, we've been planting trees to soak up excess water, but that is not a valid planning consideration, I'm afraid. But it is an example of some of the things that the council is doing outside planning to alleviate some of the problems that people in Blackbrook and other parts of the borough are experiencing. Also, The landscaping is quite significant, and what is currently an enclosed, isolated, removed from the pedestrian space will be opened up to become a nature reserve and a wild space for people to enjoy, and I look forward to that. There is quite a considerable issue around air quality, and there's no getting away from it. There will be an increase of approximately 9 to 11% in vehicle movements if, as modelled, the development is approved and the developer fills it in the way that they have indicated, or that we have modelled based on their indications to us. But the report makes clear in paragraph 3.105 that any impact will be negligible. And unfortunately, when you live in an urban area, there will always be noise and there will always be air quality challenges. But those challenges have been contained, to my mind, within the report. But notwithstanding all of that, there is a test beyond this before us, and that is the test set by Parliament in the National Planning Framework Agreement. And as we've all seen in the report, and let me just go to it myself. If you just bear with me, please, Chair, it's quite a weighty report. Paragraph 88 of the NPPF states that when considering any planning application, the Council should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm caused to the green belt and that very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt by reason of inappropriateness or any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. At paragraph 8.4 on page 139, in my mind, it has been. Additionally, there is an assumption in paragraph 18 of the NPPF which directs us to do all that we can to secure economic development. And that is a command given to us by Parliament. And if for any reason we should refuse the applicant and their application, the applicant has the scope to go to the planning inspector, and we would have to defend that. And that would be a cost that taxpayers in this borough would have to bear. So if they're not successful here, they could be successful on appeal. And that's just following the commands of Parliament. Turning to the specifics of the individual application, I've already outlined why I think the tests have been met. I've already outlined how I think the benefits outweigh any harm, and it's for that reason that I remove the report and the recommendation, but I hope that we can have a debate before it's seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Maloney.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just say, I do understand the problems that some of the residents have, especially in Blackbrook over the flooding, and also on Springfield Park because of noise. But there again, I am not an engineer. I would have liked personally to ask for, if it does go ahead tonight, and I do say if, for some work to be done on acoustic fencing at the junctions, but I do understand that is not the applicant's job to do that. We have got a problem right now before that starts. There is a problem on Haydock Lane South, as I like to call it, and I think with the traffic lights being at the top there is a massive problem. They are not safe. You can't get pedestrians across it. You have vehicles turning down there and reversing back so they don't have to go right round and underneath the bridge. That, I think, if it is accepted tonight, that would help. The roadworks there would help to alleviate some of them problems. But what I would like this council to ask the Environment Agency, not the Environment Agency, the Transport England, is if they could put, or the council, if they could put a weight restriction on the bottom of Haydock Lane South so that their traffic cannot turn down there. Who would police that? I got one put on Hinkley Road because of an industrial estate down there, but when Merton Bank Road went haywire last week, or just before Christmas, should I say, that all went to the wall, nobody policed it. So there is a worry there. I'd also like, because it's a massive problem, there's a lay-by on the East Lancs back to back with the gardens on Springfield Park. If we could talk to somebody about closing that lay-by, there is a lot of lay-bys on that East Lancashire Road. At the moment they park up, they're in refrigerated lorries and that noise is bellowing all night. So that's another problem. I really do have concerns, and I've raised it in this committee before about Junction 23. Haydock Island is an absolute mess. I live at the junction on Kenyon's Lane, and from 6:45 in the morning till 9:30 in the morning, the traffic going towards Manchester is backed up all the way to Kenyon's Lane. I know it's not like that at night, and it's not like that coming up from Manchester to Liverpool, but that says to me that that's people from this area leaving this area for jobs. They're going towards Manchester for work. But I really do have concerns about Haydock Island. It's an absolute mess trying to get out to Lodge Lane and Newton in the morning. Flooding. Flooding in Blackbrook is horrendous, and I know that with the way them people have to live with that. And yes, when David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, stood with his wellies on and said money is no object, he wasn't stood on West End Road, he was stood on the Somerset Plains, telling the people down there that money was no object. But I can assure you, the officers of this council have done everything possible to try and alleviate that problem. It's not their fault that that funding has been taken away. Now, it says in the report that the actual Clitsby Brook will be maintained by the Environment Agency and it will be built up so that there was less chance of flooding. But what I couldn't see in the report is who will maintain the runoff ponds once the business is up and going. So if I could get some quick answers on that.
Can I just highlight that to other members that clearly weight restrictions on Haydock Lane or removal of lay-bys is not part of this application. I mean, we will be talking to people outside of this application with regard to your concerns like that.
But they are concerns, Chair, I'd like that to say.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. It won't surprise many members to know that I've got deep reservations about this application. And Anthony and Jeanette have spoken to that tonight already, and I could probably speak for at least an hour on this application, but I won't do so because the objectors have raised many of the issues that I share as being concerns. It doesn't give me any particular pleasure to have to sit here in opposition to what my good friend and comrade in arms, Councillor Macaulay, has said. But I feel I have to, in the circumstances. We are in a position where all of us around this table who are elected members from whichever party know the difficulties we're having in funding. And we are talking about funding for protection of the most vulnerable. That is for sure. And that's been caused by the Conservative government and the coalition government before it. Let's not beat around the bush. They're forcing us into a position where we have to look at alternative streams of revenue to protect our most vulnerable. So let's lay the blame where it stands. But within that, when I was looking at the application and rocking back on core principles, I saw a quote from Nye Bevan, which I wasn't familiar with, but I think it's instructive to us, particularly those on the Labour benches here. And Nye Bevan said, "Stand not too close to the rich man, lest he destroys you. Stand not too far away, lest he forget you." And that's the position I think we are finding ourselves in at the moment. We can't assess this application in isolation. To discharge our responsibilities properly, we must assess it on planning grounds, but also assess against the background of the Manchester Spatial Plan and what's going on in general planning-wise across the north and in a rush for all these logistic sites. To do so, otherwise, we'll be counterintuitive. I understand why that's happening, by the way, and John's talked about that. I have a real problem with the traffic assessment, and I'm going to concentrate mostly on that because that is a material planning ground. That's a material planning ground. I'm sure the officers would agree. If I'm calling the traffic assessment into question, that's a material planning ground. In the traffic assessment, just give me a second, I've got papers everywhere. The initial traffic assessment from August 2016 at 5.12 in the document states, through consultations with St Helens MBC as set out in Chapter C of the ES, which is the environmental statement, to assess cumulative highways impacts, the following employment sites are required to be considered as part of the opening year and future year assessments of the Florida Farm North development proposals. 1. Parkside. 2. Haydock Green, which we passed some time ago at Penny Lane. 3. The Canmore scheme, which is right next to Florida Farm. And then it goes on to say, whilst the Haydock Green and Canmore schemes are not by definition committed developments, and the short-term delivery of Parkside site is unlikely, the applicant has agreed with St Helens MBC for the scoping of the ES to assess all 3 sites with regards to cumulative impacts. Now, we've been told tonight that we have to look at what is likely and reasonable. Parkside is not committed, Canmore is not committed, and yet they're included in the cumulative assessment. But we're told that Haydock Point can't be. Haydock Point is 1.8 million square feet. It is 2 miles away from this application. Parkside is 4 miles away from the application. It's right by Haydock Green. But we can't consider it because it came in late. Now, I understand from Peel, who are a massive organisation, that they first contacted us on the 4th of November with regard to this. Now, the updated traffic assessment from Hydrock is dated the 23rd of November. It is a huge material issue here, Haydock Point, that is not considered in the cumulative highways impact assessment. If we can take into account an application for Parkside which is 4 miles away, which is not yet in, but we can't take into account Haydock Point, which is 2 miles away, which is not yet in, then that's a real problem for me on our roads. A huge problem on our roads. It is 1.8 million square feet. It is bigger than Florida Farm. It is not accounted for in the traffic assessment. That is in the documents. It's incontrovertible. I've read the documents. So I don't quite understand why we can only take into account what's likely and not committed assessments, and yet we're taking account of non-committed assessments in the documents anyway. It's contradictory, I'm afraid, and that is in the documentation. So, my main concern was always the transport, was always the infrastructure we've got. Omega at Warrington is taken account of all the way through the application. Comparisons are made all the way through the application. In the initial transport assessment, Omega was used. Our officers queried the larger number of traffic movements, and then in the response, Omega is then put to one side. Oh, it's anomalous, it's not indicative of true movements. And the reason given for that in the updated document on the 23rd of November is Berrycoat's experience. Now, that sounds to me like the Mandy Rice-Davis defence. Well, they will say that, wouldn't they, really? I can't see any documentation that supports why that should be dropped. So, I'm touching quite on technical stuff there. It's in the documentation. You can read it for yourselves. I've seen it. It concerned me. It still concerns me. It's a material problem, I think. This application at Haydock Point is from Peel. It is likely, it is reasonable to accept it. It came in time for it to be taken account of here. It should be taken account of because it will come in as likely a manner as Parkside and Canmore. And we should take that into account. So, I'll conclude by saying that I am concerned about flooding, I'm concerned about pollution, but I've talked too much already, so I apologise. I drive to my office every day along the M62 and the M56, and I drive past the wide vistas of Omega, and I see Brakes, and I see Hermes, and I see Travis Perkins, and I see Asda, and I see the Hook Group. I then get to the junction where I turn off, and I go past the behemoth of Amazon and DHL, and I go into work. And aside from the size of these things, which are not as big as this one, 2 things they have in common. They have direct, quick access roads onto the motorway network. They don't have to go down a road built pre-World War II. And secondly, there is not a dwelling house in sight. So, this is not a question of not in my backyard. This is a question of in nobody's backyard. This should be built away from people's dwellings so their lives aren't blighted by them. And I, for one, will be rejecting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Pearl.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've had quite a lot of reservations about the plan. I agree with what Councillor Bond has said. He's actually taken some of what points I was going to make. First of all, I'll go on the traffic. Whatever we get now, everything's going to go on to the A580, and we've got junction 23. Right, that's great. We can get to junction 23 even though there's big queues, and to me, Haydock Island is a mess. But has anybody ever been on the M6? Even on a Sunday, it's tailgated. There's always even an accident. All right, the government said, yeah, we can use the emergency lane. What happens if somebody breaks down? You still got a hold up. At present now, you've got to think of the transport, because we've got a 24% increase in traffic, as one of the objectors said. Coming with that, we've got the different pollution. According to 3.25, 68% of the health is through traffic. That's going to increase with more transport, HGVs. In fact, there's certain cities within this country are going to ban diesel. So we're putting more of it on the road, which will affect our children's health. Anybody who suffers from chest, there will be problems as well. We go on to, we'll touch the highways. The flooding, I can have sympathy with the lady over there who spoke. I think it was objector number 5, the late Boxing Day 2015 in my own ward. I was out with my fellow councillors helping getting water away from people's homes. Because it wasn't in the actual house, it was only up to the doorstep. United Utilities wouldn't come out, but that's not a planning matter for this. I'm just trying to say about the flooding. When you build and take away land, and that land was quite marshy, as certain councillors found out when they were walked on it at the site visit, you're bound to get, the water's got to go somewhere. I know we've said that, yeah, well, there's going to be a couple of ponds, and the council will do something. But in my own ward, we've built on open spaces, and we're flooded. It's made our flooding, the water level higher because of this. And I can see the same happening in Blackbrook. Now we come to the part of green space, the green belt. I, for one, do not like green belt being used up. All right, we're on about creating jobs, and we need jobs. And around the table, everybody's blaming this government. But since before 1945, we've had Labour Conservative. Oh, sorry, we had a coalition government for a few years. But what have they done about jobs in the northwest? Nothing. Everything's gone down south. So you can't just blame this government. You've got to blame your own government, previous governments as well. But then we're not here for this. The planning isn't supposed to be political. So I don't know why that's being brought up. Well, in the report, it does say about Parkside. I know there's a proposed application which hasn't come through yet, but this development can't be used on the green belt there. Why? What's the difference between that part of the green belt and this green belt? Anybody can enlighten me on that? I mean, I can go on all night with different aspects of it. The dust is quite close to houses. Also, I think that we got 1,960 objections from local people in Haydock. It's a democracy, so it looks as though the people of Haydock don't want it. And that's all I need to say.
Councillor, there was quite a few issues you brought in to the mix there that weren't relevant to this application. So an officer's asked to respond to those, if that's okay with you.
Thank you, Chair. Just covering some of the issues, you raised flooding as an issue. That's already been addressed in a response on, I'm not going to repeat that. Greater Manchester Plan again was referred to. We've already responded to that, so I'm not going to repeat myself. With regard to Parkside, one of the reasons Parkside's different to the potential Peel site is actually referred to in the core strategy. It's actually identified as a development site in the core strategy specifically. So that's why it's different to the Peel, or one of the reasons why it's different to the Peel proposal. Parkside is Greenbelt, and that's acknowledged in the core strategy, which is the present local plan. With regard to Junction 23 and the M6, the Highways England is the Highways Authority. It's for them to respond to us. If they don't think this development will create a problem, they have not objected. It's not for us to say that there's going to be a problem. They are the Highways Authority, and as we've referred to in the report, they have not objected to this proposal.
Just on the last point you made about local democracy and the number of objections is not material to determination of the application. And I know local democracy is referred to, but what you cannot do is base your decision on the fact that lots and lots of people have objected. What you've got to look at is what the material planning considerations are and what those objections say. You cannot look at the volume.
Councillor Neil. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure there's not a person around this table that doesn't feel the responsibility that this is a green belt that we're being asked to release. The NPPF does say the fundamental aim of the green belt policy is to prevent urban sprawl. So for me, this is the point at which I had to start. And if you refer to the documentation on page 13, the development would not contribute to the unrestricted urban sprawl of a large built-up area because it is constrained to the west, south and east. It would not result in the merging of towns. For me, starting at that point, I then had to consider the socio and economic need. I'd like to give credit to the residents who've objected because you've put very strong arguments that we have had to ask answered. I share concerns about the traffic increase, about the area, pollution and the impact on health. However, we represent the entire borough of St Helens as well as our own wards. I have to weigh up the food poverty in St Helens at the moment and the number of people that are using food banks directly because they are unemployed or they're being sanctioned in terms of the benefits. The impact on their health in terms of deprivation is massive, and that cannot be underestimated. I've worked very closely with young people in St Helens for a number of years, and our young people want training, they want progression and they want skills, and unfortunately at the moment we cannot deliver without schemes such as this. So while it's very heavy on my mind that we are being asked to release Greenbelt, I would fully support this application because I think it's a once in a generation release that we are being asked here, and we are being asked to do it to secure the future of St Helens Borough and the young people of this borough.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. This site is a huge site. To put it into context, it is nearly twice the size of the new Liverpool 2 docks. The large warehouse that is proposed is massive, bigger than anything in the area, including those on Burton Wood Air Base. These are being built in a residential area. There's no doubt about that. There are houses all around. And I question the fact that there are going to be 2,500 new jobs. And I have grave doubts about all this being said about the highways, that it isn't going to have a serious impact. You want to try going through Haydock Island in the morning and whatever. Now, I can't carry on that one because all I'll be doing is repeating what Councillor Bond, Councillor Pearl has already said. So we will leave it at that. We have to take note of what the people are saying, because what the people are saying is that, that it is going to destroy 37 hectares of greenbelt land. Now, we've heard of the applicant that they believe there are exceptional circumstances. We've heard of the objectors that there are not. We've got to make up our own minds on that, and over the last couple of weeks I've been reading through all the documents, everything that has come in. We've got this problem, and now we know with the local plan and whatever, we are up to here with Greenbelt and whatever. But in this case, we have to say, are there any exceptional circumstances? The residents are saying, no, there aren't. I will support the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I have the unenviable task of living in Haydock, and no doubt I'm going to lose some friends. Right? That having been said, I don't represent Haydock or Blackbrook. I represent one of the most deprived areas in St Helens and one of the most deprived areas in the whole of the country. Par. Right? There's people using food banks down Par in large numbers. Some people are not getting any food. They don't get clothes. They get free gifts at Christmas to give to the kids. That was because most of them worked down the pits, and they have never recovered since they had lost their jobs down the pits. I've got to stick with them people. I've represented them for 21 years, and I will continue to represent them for the next 2 years until I get booted out. But I will be voting for this application. The bus services have been mentioned. There's no bus service up there. Well, there won't be because there's no developments up there. When there's the developments up there, we'll see if we can get a bus service on. And I'll be taking that up with Liam Robinson next week, on the 25th. Yeah, I received an email off of John Thornby on Friday night. It's the most disgusting email I've received in 24 years on this council. I think there's something wrong, seriously wrong with that guy's head. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Can we have some clarification, please? Because it was brought up before that it's Greenbelt, but there was some mention before about it actually being a previous coal mining area. So is it reclaimed Greenbelt, or is it has it always been Greenbelt?
If I could just clarify, the site is in the Greenbelt. You can have sites in the Greenbelt that are developed. It happens to be greenfield as well, and there's a difference between it being greenbelt, greenfield, and previously developed. It's in the Greenbelt. That's what it's allocated for. It may have been at some time in the past, as with quite a lot of areas in St Helens, that it was subject to mining. And there are mine shafts all over this borough. Having said that, though, the site has regenerated and it's being used for agriculture. That makes it greenfield. There is a difference between it being greenbelt and greenfield. The greenbelt is an allocation in the plan, and that's what we're talking about in terms of openness and very special circumstances.
It's just that there's a lot of, as you say, there's a lot of areas within the town now that have been previously mining areas that have been reclaimed, that we're getting back a lot of green space. So that's my issue there, that although we're trying not to use up with the green belt space, a lot of places have already actually, which had been previously been used as industrial areas, are being used now as green space.
Yeah, I think we understand what you're saying about it being greenified, but that's not the same as green belt. So there are more green areas through the Mersey Forest and people like that, but that's not to do with this issue.
Councillor Fulham said that this was a colliery until the 1980s, which may have caused some confusion, because it wasn't a colliery until the 1980s. Parkside was. So that may be what's caused the confusion. I don't know.
Do you want to just respond quickly to that?
Yeah, just for information, I may have got the timeline wrong, but it was formerly mined for coal, but I was quite clear when I spoke to say that it had entered into the green belt, and it's the green belt test that is before us today. And I don't think that changes anything that I've said in my mind, but it's for each individual member to make their own assessment, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Pearson?
Just a couple of brief questions for officers. We've been advised in the past that a right to a view is not a planning issue and that it doesn't exist. But on 8.9 it talks about visual amenity and says harm will be caused to visited amenity to resident properties along Liverpool Road. This is contrary to policy and should be given weight against the proposed development. Is there a difference between visual amenity and a right to a view?
Yes, specifically this is addressing the visual impact. So it's not the fact that the view is lost.
So it's how it looks.
It is what the impact of the view is.
Right, okay. The other question I want to ask, Chair, is there's been some complaints concerning our discussions with Wigan about developments, and Wigan have offered no objections to this development taking place. It occurs to me that Wigan are probably engaged in the same sort of process that we are now. Are there any proposals that you know of by Wigan Council that would have an impact on this development in terms of additional traffic, etc., etc.?
I'm not aware of any planning applications. No.
Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me to reflect upon our role in this in terms of taking the starting point that this development is in the green belt. And it's our job to question the weighing the benefits of the special circumstances against the inherent harm of that designation. Now, I've heard tonight some powerful arguments from the residents in terms of material planning considerations, eloquently backed up by the ward councillors and other speakers at this debate. I've also heard equally passionate assertion from Councillors Macaulay and Fulham in relation to the need for jobs, again supported by members of this committee. However, it seems to me there are still far too many unknowns and speculative aspects to this application in terms of the numbers and the types of jobs within what is a complicated and quite massive site. I'm thoroughly unconvinced by the traffic impact being negligible or moderate or I don't buy that for a second. Both within the highway, and I understand that's the Highways Agency at Junction 23, but it's unsustainable as it is, in my view. And I do not accept that the local road network is in a position to be able to deal with the additional traffic which is being proposed as part of this development. And therefore, in my weighting of these factors, I don't consider that the benefits alluded to tonight actually outweigh that harm, so I will be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Long, did you indicate?
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. I think in Councillor Fulham, when he was moving, I think he was moving as amended by the officers in terms of the changes to the conditions. So I think that needs to be made very clear from the start that we are talking about this, not the substantive in the paper, but the substantive amended conditions. I think there's been a lot of soul searching on all parts of the council over this, and I have a lot of sympathy for the residents and colleagues in terms of dealing with this, because it isn't a straightforward thing. I was struck by Councillor Fulham's setting out of the proposition in that it was very much a legal approach to this, and I think that's not inappropriate in terms of our deliberations today. We are here in a quasi-judicial kind of role, and we therefore have to adopt a number of significant constraints on what we'd like to do and constraints on our behaviour. I think in terms of particularly in terms of weighing this test that we're trying to grapple with, I see that we're weighing a number of conflicting interests, and I think there are. That's why it's quite finely balanced and quite difficult. But we're weighing the objectors, heartfelt, very emotional, understandably so, with the applicant, who's therefore going to approach this in a much more business and focused approach. We're weighing the needs and requirements and aspirations of present residents with future residents of the borough. So we have a yoke that we need to bear in mind, that those people aren't necessarily going to have people speaking for them, because they're not here, they're people for the future. Their children, as Councillor Macaulay pointed out, in terms of his grandchildren. We're also weighing another conflicting issue in terms of the few versus the many. The residents immediately in the vicinity of this development against the rather wider potential of the community across St Helens and indeed beyond St Helens into other places. And I think we do have to not forget that a number of those aspects, a number of those legs of those conflicting interests are not necessarily going to be terribly well advocated here. And I think it behoves us as a planning committee to make sure that we do actually represent the less well advocated aspects of that. I do think the issues are finely balanced. I am struck, though, that there's a difference in the nature of the interests or the issues that we're trying to balance. There are a lot of multiple and essentially slight or moderate, as they've been characterised by the officers, issues. There's a lot of them, but they're slight or moderate in the main, and tests have been applied very carefully in terms of whether they're severe or not. And I think when we edge into severe over a lot of issues, then clearly I think the balance shifts the other way. I haven't found that in terms of what the officers have said, in terms of the documentation, that actually a lot of these issues are really, in fact, moderate or slight. And the corollary for that is that they are within certain bounds, subject to mitigation or amelioration. They can be dealt with in due course. I do think the highways issue is an issue, and I don't think anybody who knows the area can deny that the highways isn't a concern. I think the fundamental difficulty we've got in terms of Junction 23 is Highways England. And essentially we're putting ourselves in this quasi-judicial position of actually disagreeing and trying to overturn Highways England, and I don't think that is a sustainable ground ultimately in terms of if this proceeded beyond this council. In other words, it's a fruitless attempt for us to try and do that, because we would, I think, in my judgment, I suspect we would lose. I think there is, though, against that, those multiple issues, there's the issue about how substantial and profound a form of investment this is in terms of the borough. And I do think it is substantial and profound in terms of the number of jobs and in terms of the characteristics of the jobs. And yes, I do appreciate there are lots of other distribution hubs, logistic hubs suddenly appeared in the area. I think that's a bit of a clue that actually what we're trying to do is deal with the deindustrialisation that Councillor Fulham mentioned in the past, that in his presentation at the beginning, that the reason why this borough has been employment deprived for so many years is because it has deindustrialised. It's not a party political point. It has been a process which has occurred over many generations. But the country is reindustrialising in a different way, and it's on service economy, it's logistics, it's things that we don't necessarily recognise as jobs in the old fashion. And I think it's important to therefore consider that this investment in this particular set of jobs would be a profound and significant change for the borough. And I think if we don't get on that bus, so to speak, then we're going to be in trouble later on, because we will have removed ourselves from another aspect of the growing economy over and above the fact that we've already deindustrialised already. So balancing all those things together, I think my view is ultimately it comes down on the side of support for this. I do think it's difficult, but I think ultimately, if we're thinking about the present and future residents of the whole of the borough, then I think that points to acceptance of this. And so, if not seconding this, I'd certainly indicate my support for Councillor Fulham's proposition.
Thank you very much, Councillor. If I could interject, I too have heard a lot of what's been said, and I do respect what the local residents, the worries and the fears, and it is understandable. And the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who object to that. But where I'm coming from is for the people of St Helens, that's 180,000 people. Lots of people tell me, they say St Helens is going backwards. They said there's nothing in the town centre, there's no jobs, we look at our neighbours and we're a poor relation. And so I did a little bit of research and I looked at the census figures for Warrington and for Wigan between 2001 and 2011. And they actually upheld what residents were telling me, because the population in Wigan between those years rose 5%. The population in Warrington between those years rose 5%. The population of St Helens in those years, minus 1%. There was no growth there at all. Now, we have clawed back a little bit of population, but it's a tiny amount since about 2008. And the reason for that is that we've no jobs. That's the problem. Now, 2,000 jobs, for me, possibly means 1,000 people from St Helens will be able to get jobs in St Helens and won't have to commute to other places, because there's a cost to commuting. It could be £50 a week in running your car or transport costs, and that £50 a week could be reduced to £10 a week, and that's £40 a week in your back pocket to spend in St Helens every week. So the more jobs we keep within the borough, then the more money we will be spent in the borough. What will that do? Well, that will invigorate the town. If there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds additionally being spent week on week in the borough, that is bound to have an effect. I've heard these tales about these 0 hours contracts, I don't believe them. I think these jobs are significant now. So the consequences for me is that local cash will stay local. But we do need to help the residents by you know, that's quite clear in my mind. With regards to pollution, I am very serious about pollution. I'm a scientist. I hate particulates. I hate oxides of nitrogen and sulphur and carbon monoxide and dioxide. And one of my colleagues, I think Councillor Pearl, mentioned that some cities are already banning HGVs. This is national government needs, everybody in this room should be campaigning to national government to make sure the manufacturers' vehicles get them cleaner, and tomorrow isn't soon enough. If that was the case, or there were alternative types of motoring, perhaps hybrid, there would be a significant health saving, thousands of lives a year, just by that one act. So I understand the problems with regards to the traffic congestion, and that's going to be something we're going to have to deal with eventually. But we can deal with pollutants. We don't have to feed these oxides into our children's and grandchildren's throats and mouths. We should be able to do that if we campaign strongly enough. So when I look at the overall picture, anybody who doesn't think green belt is not going to be utilised at some point, we can honestly say it is. It is. And there's no other site I can see, and I've scoured this area. We either have these logistic sites of this size, or we don't have them. But we can't put them on greenbelt, or we can't put them on brownfield, sorry. So, with a heavy heart, in many ways, I will be supporting this application. Councillor Fulham.
Thanks, Chair. I believe it was Mr. Burrows, but forgive me if I've got the name of the objector wrong. One of the contributors made reference or a request that there is a named vote, and as the proceedings are recorded, it would make sense to my mind, and I wonder if the committee's got an appetite to agree to the request. And notwithstanding that, and through you, Chair, if other members haven't got any other contributions to make, and I believe the motion's been seconded, I suggest we move to a vote, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Bond. What, the named vote? The named vote, okay.
For clarity, I'll second it, for the record, yeah.
Yeah, you can third it, Councillor Long, but you can't second it. Does anybody else want to have any comments before we go to a vote? My legal team tell me that I need 5 members to accept that we have a recorded vote. So that's easily done, okay. If I can get Kelly to actually call out your names, then you can say you're either for or against or abstain from this application. So I'll leave that to Kelly.
Okay, so we'll start alphabetically. Councillor Bond. So
Against.
For, against, or abstain. Sorry, against. Thank you. Councillor Charlton. For. Councillor Clark. For. Councillor Cross.
Against.
Councillor Fulham.
For.
Chair, please. Councillor Glover. Councillor Johnson. For. Councillor Long.
For.
Councillor Maloney. For. Councillor Neal.
For.
Councillor Pearson.
For.
Councillor Roberts.
For.
Councillor Pearl.
Against.
And finally, Councillor Jones.
I am against.
Thank you, members. The application has been accepted by 10 votes to 4. Nobody abstained. I'll have a quick adjournment for 5 minutes. Obviously, people who want to leave can do, or they can stay for the rest of the meeting, and we can have a quick breather. Thank you. We're still on agenda item number 4, but we're on the second application, which is 2016 0835 6 Lawton Road, Rainhill. Mrs. Hale.
Thank you, Chair. I've just put our ordnance survey plan identifying the site on the screen in front of you within the context of the one of the conservation areas in Rainhill, where the application sits. And as you can see, there are a variety of different house types in the area. Some of you may recall that extensions and works to this property was previously considered by members last year. Those proposals were refused, and that decision was upheld at appeal. This proposal is also for various works, including an extension to the side of the main dwelling and the rear of the garage, raising the garage roof and carrying it through to the extension by around 0.4 metres, alterations to the front elevation, and a demolition of an outrigger at first floor and a dormer to the rear. The council received 6 representations on this proposal, mainly concerned about the character and appearance of the resulting dwelling and the impact on neighbours, amongst other things. In terms of the assessment, and in general terms, the house has to be looked at from the public realm, and that means basically looking at the front elevation. I've put a couple of images on the screen, and if you look at the 2 images on the left-hand side, that shows the existing front elevation of the house and the proposed front elevation on the house. And as you can see, the impact on the character is relatively minimal. The overall scale and proportion of the dwelling would in fact remain virtually the same. In terms of impact on neighbours and amenity, I've tried to show...
Chair, can I just ask a question that is pertinent to the slide? Is there a spelling mistake on a typo? Because it says proposed 3 times and existing once.
There isn't. I'm going to explain it. Sorry. You're all right. The second slide, the images on the right-hand side are to show you what the amenity impact will be in relation to either side of the dwelling as proposed in relation to what the house is now. The red line is the outline of what the dwelling is at the moment. And you've got basically the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the elevation, both of which are proposed. And as you can see, the impact is substantially less, primarily because the first floor outrigger will be demolished and be replaced by a dormer extension. So we believe the overall impact of the extensions are less, and it complies with policy. We therefore believe it to be sustainable development, and we're recommending that planning permission be granted.
Thank you, Mrs. Hale. There are some members here of the public that weren't here when we gave the protocol previously, so if I can ask you to read it out again, please.
Thank you, Chair. To assist those members of the public who wish to address the committee, I'd like to point out the following. A total of 5 minutes is allocated for those speaking for, and 5 minutes allocated for those speaking against the application. Comments should be restricted to material planning issues. There will be no opportunity for dialogue between the committee and members of the public, nor will the public be able to ask questions of the officers or the committee. Interruptions from the public are not acceptable, and the chairman reserves the right to suspend the meeting, have the room cleared and recommence the meeting without the public being present. And finally, if you have a mobile phone with you, please could you switch it off because it can interfere with the communications. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Hazel Rusk, if you want to take a seat, you've got 5 minutes in your own time. Thank you.
It's on. Oh, it's on. Has it started? All right. Okay, I
It's your green lighthouse.
Yeah. Right. I'm the part owner along with my husband, of number 4 Lawton Road. this dwelling number 6 Lawton Road is a 1928 bungalow, therefore has high ceilings, single storey it is at the moment. There's no upper floor to it, as the same as 6 bungalows of varying designs in the road. The road is on a hill, so we are one step down. And in fact, the front has no impact to us, so, you know, that's not an issue. The issue is that we sit 2'6" down the hill from the dwelling, which means that we overlook quite a high bungalow. Our own is a modern one, a lot lower than that particular bungalow. That particular bungalow projects to the back of our bungalow as well. And at the moment, we look at a flat roof at the back, which, yes, we applaud the fact that they're going to take part of the attic roof down, which doesn't have any dwelling space inside it. But the other part is going to be a protruding higher dormer. It's actually half of what the protruding roof is at the moment. The trouble with that is we haven't got any sizes there, but it's, as far as we can work out from the plans, it's going up 1 metre to the top of the dwelling, which will be a dormer, which is 10 foot odd wide and has a window at the end. The lower floor, which will remain the ground floor and which hasn't been stated, is actually increasing in height. And that is increasing in height by 1.34 millimetres, 1.4. It's our sunny side. We actually are on the northern side of that property. We're down the hill 2'6". We're a much lower dwelling, and any height restriction whatsoever has an impact on our light, amenity, sunlight, as the Secretary of State's representative said when it went to appeal. He upheld that. There's going to be an increase in that, and there's going to be an increase in the top dormer height as well, which we think adds to the mass of the actual building. Yes, they're taking part of the rear attic down, but they're adding exactly the same mass, which was an issue last time, by increasing the rear ground floor and also the upper floor dormer, which is of considerable size. I'd like to speak for the other side as well, for number 8, because the work commitments restrict them coming. They, in fact, have got the higher garage. Their lounge window looks out on the side. Yes, they are up the hill, but at the moment, the rear of the bottom of their lounge windowsill is at the same height as the top of the garage. The garage is going upwards, therefore, about 1/3 of their window space at the bottom is actually precluded from any light view amenity on that side. They're also having an extra bedroom built on the back of that garage to the same height, which again adds to this mass, which was too much on appeal to add to the Secretary of State and to the committee at the time last year. They're also concerned about a hardwood tree that members would allow the willow tree to be protected in some way so that it's not taken down, because they wish that hardwood tree to be remained on that side of the dwelling. I'd just like to add something else as well. It's had on our side, which is actually the right-hand side on that side, that's our window. It's had the door added in place of the kitchen window that was there before, which was of the old sash size, the same as the other 2 windows that appear further forward. It's now had that, what is a picture window of some width, added to it. The door becomes where the old window was, and that window to the very rear there looks out exactly onto our bedroom window, but we are lower, so they look straight that way. From that picture window, they will look straight into our side bedroom window. Added to that, the rear is all open plan at the back. That is part of an open plan whole space, which was the Sun Lounge. And it on the back end already has 4x folding doors on the back.
Your 5 minutes is up.
Right, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I would recommend that it obviously doesn't go through.
I believe Keith Summers is here. Again, 5 minutes, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Keith Summers, and I represent Mr. and Mrs. Gordon. I'm their architect and their agent. Mr. and Mrs. Gordon are a local family. They have a young son, and since they bought this property 2 years ago, they've wanted to renovate it as a family home and their forever home. The application before you tonight is completely different from that which was heard last year and that was then appealed. We started from scratch with this design. The key part to this was a link between the existing garage and the existing rear single-storey extension, and we are talking about single-storey extensions. Through the whole process, Mr. and Mrs. Gordon have taken on board the concerns raised both at committee last year, neighbours concerned, and work collaboratively with your planning officers, your conservation officers, and your tree officers to pull this whole application together that is before you tonight. Your officers have rigorously assessed the drawings and details, and there has been some queries raised in terms of heights, which I think need to be clarified, and I'm sure there'll be questions on that which need to be raised. The height of the roof being raised, the flat roof, which is at 2 different heights, has been queried. The garage roof is slightly lower than the extension roof to the rear. 400 millimetres is about that much. And ultimately, the raising of the height of the flat roof is predominantly to improve insulation. It's it's a house that suffers badly from condensation, and part of the refurbishment and renovation works is involving in upgrading the insulation in the house. There was a query raised also related to the tree and the house on the other side at number 8. The tree was asked by the neighbour to your tree officer if it could be removed, and my clients agreed to that. It was a request from the neighbour for it to be removed, hence it was removed on the plan. This was through the planning process. Also, perhaps your officers could clarify the heights of the window sills and the window heads in relation to the fence between number 6 and number 8. The single-storey extensions which I've talked about are have a fence between on both sides. On side number 8, it's much higher than 1.8, which will be a standard fence height. And perhaps your officer can clarify exactly what height that is, but the window to number 8 looks at a fence. It does not look at my client's house. So, in summary, I do hope that members will endorse your officer's recommendation to approve this application following its complete redesign and allow this family to renovate their forever home. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification which to raise, please?
Just a couple, thank you, Chair. Just on the height issue, Mr Summers is correct that the plans do show an increase in height of 0.4 metres, 400 mil. I think Mrs Russ was maybe trying to refer to it in imperial measure, but that's what you're considering this evening. In terms of the appeal decision, again, Mr Summers was right that this proposal is very, very different to what the appeal was considered on. I've not put lots of images on the slides, but if you particularly look at, that's the proposed first floor, so the image on the left-hand side is what the committee refused, and that was upheld on appeal in floor plan format. And now what we've got proposed is clearly much, much less. Yes, it's adding in a first floor. It's maybe not used as living accommodation at the moment, but the impact clearly is less than that considered at appeal. In terms of the trees, there is a proposal to remove a willow tree that's next to the boundary, that's shown on the plans, and there'll be replacement planting. And in relation to other trees within the rear garden, there are tree protection measures that are recommended and shown on the plans.
Thank you. Members? Councillor?
Thanks, Chair. I'm grateful for the clarification, or should I say translation of imperial to metric, as it did necessitate me to get my calculator out and I got the measurements wrong. I might sound lighter in stones, so I know my weight, but I don't know distance in imperial. Anyway, turning to the application, I abstained when it first came before us, as I didn't think it was in character. It was befitting of an area in a conservation zone. However, conservation zones are not to be preserved for a museum piece, they are to be lived in. And I've considered the application, I've considered the evidence given to committee tonight, and it is important to make sure that this home is fit for a family, or for any resident for that matter. But it is important, I think it is persuasive that a family is moving in, because we don't want Rainhill to just be an area that has a particular preponderance of one age group. So the height of the necessity to raise the height of the roof to make sure that it is thermally efficient, I think, is warranted and proportionate. I think that this new design is much more reduced in scale. I don't see how it can impact substantially, if at all, on neighbours. And I think it is much more befitting of a conservation area. And I will be supporting this application. And when the time comes, I will move the recommendation to grant permission, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl?
Thank you, Chair. Did we do a site visit on this last year? Yeah, I thought we did. Yeah. As I can remember, it was completely different to what it is now. And I think from what I've read, the fact that it's completely different, I'll be supporting this as well.
Can I just say that if I can recall, the person who was attempting us to accept this last time was the lady who actually lived there, and it was a very moving account from her about she was trying to do the best for her family. And I did have a lot of sympathy with it. However, the actual plan at that time for the development was not in keeping. And I remember stating that I think it was from the front, the dormer windows or the windows were very obtrusive. This is a completely different layout. I do believe that it falls in line with the conservation area theme. And I will be, when the time comes, agreeing to this application as well. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you. I went on the site visit last time, but I didn't attend the meeting because I got a phone call. We'd had a flood in Rainford, so I had to go there then. I noticed that the parish council has said no to this one. I wondered, on what... I know it says the grounds, but do we think those grounds are material at this sort of stage? Because I can see that the plan has totally changed.
Are you asking officers, councillor, their views on that?
I'm asking anyone who can give me an answer, Mr. Chairman, please.
Am I allowed to come back on them?
No.
Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of Rainhill Parish Council. I didn't participate in any of the discussions associated with this, and I haven't also been privy to the previous iterations. I understand this is the third iteration. I think, and I can understand that a lot of progress has been made in terms of changing the design of the property, and I hear what the officer's saying. I think the concern that was apparent from the parish council was associated with still the heights and the impact on the adjacent properties. And I think I have some sympathy with that, Frank, because I think it is quite difficult to kind of accommodate this in the context of the site. So therefore, I think I'm still not comfortable with this as a proposal. We'll be voting against, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to? Councillor Bond?
Thanks, Chair. I've looked at this and I work in an area of the country that is quite wealthy, and there's a shortage of reasonable, affordable housing there, and some very old properties there, and a lot of them are being renovated in a manner of this one, and I see a lot of that in Wilmslow and the surrounding areas of it, and looking at it, I share some of the reservations that Councillor Long talks about. And the gut feeling, I think, that Councillor Fulham talked about last time, and I am concerned about this. I think the houses are very close together, they're of a particular nature, and I'm minded to agree with Councillor Long on this one, on the basis that it doesn't look appropriate to me.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to input? Well, that being the case, I will second Councillor Fulham's motion to accept this officer's. If sure nobody wants to input any more, okay, we can go to the vote then. Can I see those in favour of the application?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Those against, please.
3.
That's no abstentions then, isn't it? Okay, that application has been successful as well. We'll just take 60 seconds and then we'll continue with the business. You're more than welcome to stay if you wish. Right, thank you, members. Can I just remind you that because we're still being filmed, obviously you'll need to press the button on your microphone so that it can be picked up. Item number 5 is appeals. Planning appeals. Anybody got any comments on those? Mrs. Hale?
Just one appeal to update. Chair, on page 200, the application or the appeal at land adjacent to 25 Mill Lane, Rain Hill, that appeal was dismissed in the last couple of weeks.
Do we accept that report? Move that, Chair. Thank you. Item number 6 is about delegated officer agreements, rejections. Anybody got anything they want to highlight, ask questions on? Is that report agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. And lastly, number 7 is enforcement. Are there any issues that you want to Anything on enforcement? I hate to mention Yew Tree Farm, but I think I'll have to, just to make sure there's no updates.
There isn't at the time being. We are still in contact. We are still monitoring the site effectively. So we'll see how that goes. I'd just make a general point that we have got a lot of complaints at the moment that we're dealing with, and we're trying to deal with them as quickly as we can. So if you just be patient, Yew Tree Farm being one of them, and it does take up a lot of time. So we are monitoring the site.
Never know.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification on one of these? We had 30 Fairholme Avenue, which is the bottom of the first page of enforcements, I think. And it went through planning and was agreed, I think, about the extension and the fact that the lady was allowed to have look after 6 kids. At the end of the current position, it says monitoring ongoing compliance. How long will we monitor that compliance?
The simple answer to that question is I don't know. We will monitor it in the foreseeable future to ensure that the number of children doesn't increase. We will also have to rely on residents in the area to help us. So we will monitor it as far as we can tell, certainly for the next few months.
I do recall, Mrs Hale, that there was no feeling that there was going to be any misdemeanour, and that the client was going to, not going to make it. Okay.
Chair, can I just ask
Yep.
about the former British Legion in Thatto Heath on Scholes Lane? It's saying that compliance was required on the 26th of October and they're still awaiting compliance. Can I just get some clarification on what that means? And
There have in fact been instructions to issue a prosecution on that, so it's awaiting to go into court. Okay.
Are you indicating, Councillor Fulham?
Yes, please, Chair. Just to reflect on the 2 last comments of Mrs Hale and Councillor Charlton, that as much as there are a number of complaints backlogged, that the service has suffered from a reduction in its funding because of central government funding changes, and that's why we're not able to respond as quickly as we would prefer to. But officers, although they're busy, are doing their best, and I'm grateful for their time. Chair.
I'm sure we all are, Councillor Fulham. Does everybody accept that report? Thank you. That being the end of business. I'll see you all again shortly.